Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Connect to Any REST data source using Autonomous REST Connector. I'm Todd Wright, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Progress, and I'll be your moderator and host for today. And I just want to go over a quick disclaimer before we start the presentation. This presentation is for informational purposes only, and the reader is hereby cautioned that actual product development may vary significantly from the drafted timelines. This presentation may not be interpreted as any commitment on behalf of Progress Software Incorporated. And now I want to introduce you to our speakers for today. First, Maria Denkova and Dennis Bennett. Maria is a Senior Product Manager for Progress Data Direct, where she is responsible for the direction of Autonomous REST Connector and Hybrid Data Pipeline. She has experience in software engineering and product management. She has dedicated more than 13 years to supporting development of innovations, automation, optimization, and highly reliable integration solutions. And next to Dennis. Dennis has over 20 years of experience in working with companies to help solve their data connectivity challenges. In the past, he has worked as an application developer, DBA, and QA engineer. At Progress Software, he is a principal sales engineer for the Data Direct data connectivity and integration products. With all that said, I'm really excited to have Maria and Dennis with us today, and now I'll turn it over to Maria to start the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Let me start with a few words about our mission. Here at Progress Data Direct, we are striving to be the trusted partner for secure and intelligent data connectivity solutions, enabling businesses to connect any application to any data source at any time without coding. The Autonomous REST Connector, provided by Progress Data Direct, is built to deliver seamless, real-time connectivity between REST data and an ODBC, JDBC analytical tools of your choice and your applications. It boosts performance by decreasing the amount of time required for applications to understand and consume APIs through its codeless configuration, UI support, and intelligent sampling. The rising demand for more secure, performant, and scalable software solutions results into quickly growing number of applications with REST architecture. On the other hand, a big chunk of popular data reporting and analytic applications support JDBC and ODBC services for access to SQL data. We are filling this gap by providing ability to quickly and easily access SQL data from REST API data sources. The Autonomous REST Connector provides both a pre-built models and tools for custom development of connectivity to any REST data source. The data contained in the REST response is returned into one of the respective supported formats, JSON, CSV, or XML, and then it is intelligently normalized into SQL-like format, which can be read and written in SQL language through JDBC and ODBC application services. Our intelligent framework and graphical user interface tools provide 9 authentication methods, configuration of models for intelligent sampling and repeatable usage, codeless configuration of REST requests to the desired endpoints, ability to adjust the normalized data into SQL-like format according to your needs, auto-generated ER diagrams so you can easily review the generated tables and the relations between them, support for REST responses in the listed formats, again, JSON, CSV, and XML. The key benefits of the Autonomous REST Connector are its SQL engine, which performs intelligent conversion of REST into SQL compliant format, CRUD support for read and write operations, graphical user interface for codeless integration between REST data sources and JDBC ODBC applications, as well as the pre-built connectivity. We support a variety of REST data sources, which can be grouped in the following main categories: big data, analytics, MarTech, cloud data warehouse, DevOps, and SaaS cloud. Currently, most of the supported data sources are MarTech, SaaS, cloud, and DevOps, but we are working towards adding more into each one of the listed categories. As of today, we have more than 50 built-in connectors, and we are continuously working on increasing this spread of data sources. With the risk to repeat myself here, I would like to highlight again that you can either use a pre-built connector and have us do the heavy lifting of supporting the latest and greatest version of the data source, or you can use the Autonomous REST connector to build your own connectivity to any data source of your choice, which is not supported by us. We are continuously releasing CRUD support, as currently it is delivered for BigCommerce, Confluence Cloud, Google Contacts, Google Calendar, Google Drive, Jira, QuickBooks Payments, Klaviyo, PayPal, and some more CRUD support here for Salesforce, Chatter, ServiceNow, Tumblr, Twitter, WordPress, YouTube, Stripe, Wistia, YouTube Analytics. Our development efforts are concentrated into delivering product which is highly integrable, so you can connect to any REST data source with custom configuration, or you can select from a rich variety of pre-built connectors and let us do the support for having compatibility with the latest versions of the data sources. Cost efficient, we provide and continuously work on improving our no-code development platform, which lets you expedite your development process. Productive and scalable. The product is designed to meet broad spectrum of REST APIs. Intelligent, we are continuously improving the platform intelligence to be able to normalize any sort of complex REST responses with different levels of nested data. Easy customizable, so we can meet your needs to quickly build your own custom connector, customize the normalized data, run queries, and configure different types of authentication methods. And last but not least, the out-of-the-box user experience, inclusive of validation of the proof of concept for your use cases, and adding support to the most popular authentication methods. Here is a quick overview of our roadmap by the end of 2022 and for 2023. In terms of productivity and usability, in 2022, we are adding CRUD support for document stores, such as AWS S3, Azure Data Lake Storage, Dropbox, Box, and Google Drive, and support for stored procedures, as well as pre-built and user-defined functions. In 2023, we are adding connectors to over 50 new data sources, among which AWS Cost Explorer, SAP Qualtrics, SEMrush, Vimeo, Bing Search, Shopify, Azure Billing, and others. We are also adding functionality to the SQL editor for CRUD operations and full metadata visibility, as well as user interface capabilities for schema map configurations. Some maintainability enhancements are planned in 2023 to allow users to test connectivity to data source with configured authentication and to validate the desired REST endpoints. We are also planning to enrich the user interface with guided login support and guided tool for first-time users. And in terms of security, in 2023, our development plans include interface for custom authentication methods to allow easy configuration of not supported out-of-the-box authentication mechanisms. And we are also going to implement Grant WAD flow for dynamic application integration. To learn more about the Progress Data Direct Autonomous REST Connector, you can reach out to us via the contact form available on our website at the Pointit webpage, as well as explore a variety of available resources such as success stories, blogs, videos, on-demand webinars, tutorials, product documentation, and many more. Thank you. I will now turn over to Dennis, who is going to present a demo of the Autonomous REST Connector.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, so I am going to start by showing you the Arc Composer, the Autonomous REST Connector Composer, which can be used to not only bring in pre-built models, which Maria mentioned, but also to create models yourself if you have a REST API that we don't currently have a model for. So to do it, I'm just going to use the JDBC driver here for Arc. And I'm just going to open it up. It'll open up in a browser. And just to show you, Maria mentioned there's over 50 models that we have pre-built, and you can see a list of them here. I'll demonstrate one of the pre-built models in a minute, but before I do that, I just want to show you the steps involved if you want to create your own model, because definitely people will want to do that also. So you can see I count like about 54 models here. And as Maria mentioned, we're adding full read-write support for these. So initially, Arc was select only, which was good for a lot of the use cases we saw, which were BI tools, and also for the extract portion of ETL. But adding update support allows us to use it with even more use cases. And I plan to demonstrate using it with an ETL tool and actually use it at the load portion. But if I was going to create one from scratch, I would just click Create Model and just give it a name. I'll just give it a name like that. So what I'm going to do here, Maria mentioned we support a number of authentication methods. I'm going to here actually demonstrate using the Yelp API, just because we actually do have a Yelp model, so this would not be necessary, but it's actually a good one because it shows several of the things that are supported, things like pagination and a couple of different kinds of filtering. So the process with creating your own model is first to go ahead and sample the endpoints. And if the endpoint has authentication, obviously you'll have to configure that to get any data back. And you can see the different ones that are actually supported here. Against Yelp, it's actually a bearer token. So I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to grab it. And I've actually got one set up here. So if I'm going to go ahead and grab that and paste it in. So at this point, I've got my authentication set up, and now it's just up to me to start sampling different endpoints. And for Yelp, I've got a few of them here. You can see some of them, there's actually no filters necessary. And some of the ones that have more data, they actually enforce filtering, where you can't say, give me every business in Yelp. You have to say, give me in a specific category and a specific location. You can see there's a couple different kinds of filters here. In this case, these are query parameters after the question mark here. And the good thing is, in the sampling process, the Arc Composer recognizes these as potential filters and defines them as such. So when you send in a SQL statement that says, give me all of the auto repair shops in, Boston, it will be able to use it, even though I've sampled restaurants in Raleigh, North Carolina. Another kind of filtering we sometimes see is actually part of the URL path itself. So in this case, it actually looks to the Autonomous REST Connector Composer like that static information. So I would have to tell it, no, this is actually a business ID. This is not static data. But let's go ahead and sample one of these first ones. So in this case, it's a get, and I'm just going to paste it in. And you can see over here, it's already defined these as potential filters, and I need to give the table a name. I'll just call it businesses and hit send. And it will go ahead and authenticate and go out and bring back the data. Maria mentioned normalizing data. One thing about REST is a lot of times the data that comes back, in this case it's JSON data, but it's actually fairly complex. You may have documents embedded within documents, or in this case, we've got some arrays here. And so we're able to normalize those out in part of the sampling process and to show those as separate virtual tables. And you can see, so even though I sampled one table, I end up with several virtual tables just because of the complexity of the data coming back. In this case, we've generated a name called businesses1 just because the array has the same name as the name I picked for the top level table. I'm going to change that name just to give it something a little bit more descriptive. I'm just going to call it business details, and it will do that for me. So you can see it's made the change. The other thing you can see is when we look at it, we've just got a couple of sets of data here, and that's because this API supports pagination, and I need to tell the Autonomous REST Connector composer, what kind of pagination this actually supports. So I'm just going to say, I know from the data, from looking at the API itself, that this is row offset paging. So basically start at offset 0, give me the first chunk of data, and then go to the next set of data. So, and I also know that 50 is the most businesses I can ask for at one time. It is in a parameter called limit. There is another parameter which is actually named offset, and there's an element that says the total number. So when I update this, we should see these two go up to more, because it will actually paginate through and get more of the data. This tool itself is, the composer is going to limit itself to just 200 rows coming back. But in this case, I just want to make sure you can see that now I'm up to 10, and it actually is paginating, which is what I wanted. If I want to sample another endpoint, and let's look at this guy here, where it also has a filter parameter, but it is one that's actually part of the URL path itself. So I'm just going to say, give me a new endpoint. It's also a get. I'm going to paste it in, and I'm just going to call this table reviews. And I'm going to tell it that this information here, it's not static information, it's actually dynamic, and I want it to create a column called biz ID, business ID. And so I save that and go ahead and sample. And if we look at it, we can see that again, we've got a couple of virtualized, normalized tables coming out. And again, I'm going to change this, just right click and say, let's call it reviews details. There are a couple things I just want to point out while we're here. Performance-wise, when you have an API, a REST API that paginates, which most good REST APIs do, rather than bringing back tons and tons of data in a single chunk, it's better, it's more efficient to send it in pieces, and that way there's less latency, there's less worry of memory overruns and things like that. We have a parameter called read ahead, which allows us to, rather than serially paginating through the results, with one thread just going, give me the first chunk, second chunk, third chunk, we can set up parallel threads so they will divide the work, and it's very noticeable, the difference. So instead of saying no extra threads, I might say, give me 3, and that way I'll have 4 separate threads doing it. Another thing that's useful is just to set up some logging, and I can do that. I just need to point to basically a folder where I want the log records to go. But anyway, once I'm done, all I would do is download this file, and I've created, in this case, a very simple model, but that is the process. And I showed a couple different ways of filtering that you might encounter, and also, where the pagination setup is, and so forth. But really what I want to show you is kind of what's new in Autonomous REST Connector. And as we mentioned, there's over 50 models that we've done this work for you. So you can see I've just done a couple endpoints here, but let me bring in the list of models again, and you can see I want to use a model called BigCommerce. So what I do is just bring it up, double click, and you can see some information here, just information about the API itself, the type of authentication it uses. In this case, it's similar authentication. It has an HTTP header, which has a token in it. It gives an example of what a connection string would look like. and also just kind of describes what is actually in that model. And you can see there is a number of different endpoints that we've actually pre-sampled for you. And so basically, we did what I just showed you before with Yelp for BigCommerce. And again, if I want to see, how it's working, I need obviously to authenticate. And I know from here, it is header authentication. I've got another kind of cheat sheet here. And I'm just going to grab kind of pre-built a connection string. I'm just going to paste it in just so you don't have to watch me type. And the other thing is I'm just going to grab that security token and paste it in. Now at this point, I can just show you the endpoints, and you can see they'll come up with a bunch of them already there. And really there's nothing for me to do here. The potential filters are already defined. You can see some of them here, like looking at product information. It's specific to a product ID and so forth. The only thing before I download this, I just might want to run a quick test and just make sure I actually have it correct. So I'm just going to run a test connect. And it just does a metadata call to kind of show the different tables that it knows about from that. And I'm just going to look at a really simple one. I'm just going to overwrite this with, there's a table called brands. It's actually going to show up on the next page, but let's just hit that. There's not a lot of data in there, but this is the data I'm actually going to use further on in a demonstration. So you can see just a few rows of data, but obviously I've connected, it looks good. At this point, I can grab this connection string and use it. In this case, it's JDBC. I can use it in any JDBC tool, and I'll show you a couple. So a lot of the beauty of this is just that it makes this particular API, which is a REST API, but REST APIs are just all over the place as far as it's a very, very loose standard. So each one is done differently, and you certainly could connect straight through REST, but it just standardizes things to use something like Autonomous REST Connector to make it SQL enabled. But let me download that model we just looked at, and let's just look at it. So that actually went to my downloads directory, and I'm just going to bring it up in a text editor so you just see it. But this is the information. This is the information specific to my BigCommerce store. I picked BigCommerce just because I have information to connect to it, and I know it's a CRUD, a full update model, and I wanted to demonstrate something like that. And actually, if you look, you can see just the information as far as how it supports the updates on the different endpoints. If you're not familiar with BigCommerce, it's actually an e-commerce platform helping small businesses to set up an online e-store. A lot of it's been set up for people. It kind of makes it fast. It's similar to things like maybe Shopify and Magento, if you're familiar with those, but it's got a lot of stuff kind of built in. But the good thing is it's got that REST API, and that's the REST API is what I'm going to leverage here. And since it is now basically a standard way to access it, I can come in with a tool, and this is just a standard SQL test tool called Squirrel SQL. It's open source, and I've actually connected. I've created an alias to connect to it. And if we look at it, it's really that same JDBC URL that we were looking at over here. Basically, I just paste it in, point to the driver itself, which is just a jar file in this case, and I'm able to make a connection. So let's just do that. And when we connect, what's happening here is Squirrel SQL, as a tool, it knows nothing about this particular endpoint, but it knows it's going to do metadata calls to look at the tables and get a list of the tables. And so you can see here the list of tables, and I can do things like, I can pick a table, see some info on it. I can look at, for example, it's doing metadata calls to see the columns themselves, whether they're nullable, has information about the primary key. This is all coming from that model. And that model information, along with the authentication info I passed in, is what enables tools like this to be able to connect to a REST source that it's never seen before, exactly as if it was, you know, an Oracle or an OpenEdge or some other table. And I'm going to show you the brands table. I'm actually going to show it in another tool, but if we look at it now, I'm just doing a basic SQL call, selecting certain columns from that table, and I'm just saying, you know, where the ID is greater than 150 and order by ID. And if I run it, we can see the values that's in it right now. What I'm going to do is show, I wanted to show what's new, and obviously the idea of models is we keep expanding that with new models, but the ability to actually make updates is something very new for Autonomous REST Connector. And so rather than demonstrating this in a BI tool where select only is perfectly sufficient, I wanted to show it in an ETL tool, and I wanted to show it on the load side. So I picked a tool called NiFi, which is an open source tool. Basically, it's interesting. It was actually developed over at the NSA, National Security Agency, and then in 2014 it was donated to Apache Open Source. So I wanted to use a tool like that and show just dropping the Arc driver into a tool and basically picking up changes from another table, in this case OpenEdge, and then propagating them out through Arc into BigCommerce. So I need to basically tell NiFi about my driver. So this is actually running on my laptop, and all I have to do is copy the jar files. So this is the JDBC driver for Arc, and since I'm coming in from OpenEdge, I have the JDBC driver for OpenEdge, and it's just in a live directory. And I just looked at my status, NiFi is running. So what I do is I just create a normal JDBC connection pool, and just looking at that, this is for Arc. It's that same URL we're looking at both in the Composer and in Squirrel. This is the driver class name. This is where I stored the jar file. And that's really all I did with that, to find it just like a regular database. And I did the same thing for OpenEdge, since OpenEdge is the source of the changes. And then really I just built a flow, and you can see with NiFi, there are like different kind of components you can just drag on, processors, and you can see there's like a choice of 308 of them. And honestly, I'd never really looked much into NiFi before, but just followed the tutorial to do that, and was able to get it working. So if we look here, this is just the read for the data in OpenEdge. So I have a similar table defined in OpenEdge of brands. And I could say, if I didn't want to bring back all the columns, I could filter that list, or I could put a where clause on it again, or even set up a custom query. But really, I just kind of took the defaults on that. Some of these other steps, this one is actually probably extraneous. This would be if I have a huge data source, result set, it's able to handle it. This is actually a pretty high performance, high volume tool. But I am, using it in a very light way. Then I take the Avro output, convert it to JSON, and really here I'm getting ready to load the data or update the data into BigCommerce. So you can see I'm pointing to that JDBC connection pool. I'm doing an update on the brands table, and really just taking the defaults here. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and actually do the update. So, I've got this flow stop right now, but let's, so this is the current state. I'm really just going to change the name field. So we've got, newest name, Nike and Bennett. I'm going to come into OpenEdge and change the source table. So I'm just going to reconnect because it's been sitting for a while. And so again, I'll just call I'm just updating some of the data here. And actually, this is the one I'm in. And really, I'm just gonna go ahead and update, just using a normal driver here inside of OpenEdge. And let's just make sure the update took. So I'm just gonna verify that. So newest brand name, newest Nike, Dennis Bennett. Come to Open Commerce. It's kind of similar, but it's gonna change. So really all I'm gonna do here is start the process. And it will go ahead and do the read of OpenEdge. It'll do the processing to create the SQL statement, and then finally do the update within BigCommerce. And NiFi is just doing straight JDBC. It has no idea that this is a REST API. And let's look and see if my changes actually came through. So, and you can see it did. Newest brand name, new Nike, Dennis Bennett. So it was able to make the changes and go ahead and propagate them forward. And again, I'm just showing this because of the standardization, we're able to use Arc with tools that know nothing or are not designed particularly for REST. So Squirrel SQL and NiFi are both using it as if it was an Oracle database. And the last thing I want to show you is, remember I set up the debug record in that connection string, and I just pointed to a folder where the records go. And so let's look at this one. This is the last one. You can see it just happened a minute ago. And if I open it up in a text editor, this is my select statement, right? So I can, no, this is my update statement, sorry. So we can see we were updating, and you can see parameter markers here, and we can see the actual data that flowed into BigCommerce through the driver. And let's see if we have anything else. That's kind of really what I wanted to show you, the ability to go ahead and use the new models, use the new CRUD capabilities, and leverage it with standardized tools. And at this point, I'm done. And Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you for questions.
Hey, Dennis, I appreciate it. That was really good. You as well, Maria. Now is everyone's favorite time, which we get to ask questions about Dennis and Maria. But before we do, I have a favor for everyone on the line today. Here at Progress Data Direct, we're always looking to see what our customers are wanting to connect to in the future or even presently. The question I have, what REST endpoints are you interested in connecting to either in the present or in the future? Something that we'll do with this data is, of course, take it to our product management team and see what we can do to meet your needs. So with that said, we're going to turn the questions on the other side now and have them answered by Maria and Dennis. So the first one is, what do you mean by a model? Dennis or Maria, I'm not sure who wants to answer that one, but that's the first question.
I can answer this one. So a model is a configuration file which contains the available REST endpoints, and it also contains the metadata about the return data, which is then used as input for the normalization algorithm. In the case of CRUD support, it also contains definitions to enable write operations such as insert, update, and delete.
Okay,
I hope
great,
this answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question is, what are the different authentication methods supported in ARC?
Yeah, so I can take that. Basically, there's, I showed you the bearer token. There are other just HTTP headers. Sometimes there are tokens in the URL itself. We support OAuth 2. We support basic auth. So yeah, there's a number of different ones. And finally, we support custom authentication. And that would be really, we would see, especially early on with ARC, that sometimes people would have something that was very much like OAuth 2, except that they added their own headers to it, maybe some custom, or maybe the body that was being passed in was a little bit different. And so with custom auth, we're able to handle that. And I've actually seen it used in like a multi-step authentication process. So I guess one I didn't mention also, we have AWS authentication for some of those sources. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dennis. We have another question about models. How do you choose which models to create next? I'm not sure who wants to take that one, but that's question number 3.
I can take it.
Sure.
So we usually start from looking into the requests by our existing customers and prospects, and then we assess further the market demand for different data sources, and this is how we are able to prioritize the implementation of the next.
Okay, great. Dennis, anything to add to that one, or just?
No, that's great.
All right, great. Let's see, we have another one. Which models will be updated to include CRUD support? I know, Marie, you had mentioned something about CRUD a little bit ago, but I'm not sure if you wanted to expand on this one, or Dennis?
Yep, yeah.
Sure.
So we are eventually going to update all models to include CRUD support. And the prioritization here is based on the most used data sources by our existing customers.
Okay, great. To that, what enhancements are planned for the ARC Composer? Sounds like a product management question, but maybe Dennis wants to take it, I'm not sure.
I can give it a shot.
Sure.
A lot of it at a high level is just enhancements to usability to make it easier. The idea is to make more users even more productive. So some things like you saw me run SQL through it. We actually have a better SQL editor that we're going to add that'll show it more like a hierarchical view of tables and the columns within them and the data types and so forth, and just a little bit easier to do some SQL testing. We're working on some stored procedure and function support, which will help us particularly with the document data stores. Some of that would be for CRUD capabilities, some of it even for like create directory or file management stuff. And when I say document data stores, I mean things like S3, AWS S3, Azure Data Lake Storage, Dropbox, Box, Google Drive. We're also looking, I showed you that debug record log where it shows like the SQL that came in, it shows the REST request that went out, how long it took to be fulfilled, what the payload looked like, and so forth. We're looking to better integrate that with the Composer to make it easier. So like the idea is you wouldn't have to recreate a problem or something like that if you saw it, that you would capture it the first time. So another thing is maybe make the support for custom authentication a little more intuitive within the Composer. So, but again, all of that just to make people more productive and make it easier to actually create a model. I don't know if Maria, you want to add anything to that, or?
That sounds great. No, that sounds great.
All right, great, thanks. Dennis, this might be a question related to the demo that you gave. And the question is Yelp data going through Progress, cloud service, or direct to the consumer?
It's going direct to the consumer. I didn't show what it would look like, but basically SQL would come in, the ARC SQL engine would parse it, and from that, using the model, it would build the REST request, and that would go directly to Yelp. In that case, not going through any cloud service, it would authenticate with the info that I connected with, and it would take the payload back from Yelp and turn it into a relational results set. So there's no clouds hopped for that.
Okay, excellent. Next question might be for you as well in the demo. Does Progress support incremental data within the API framework?
So we support what the API itself supports. So if the API itself had something where, whether it's perhaps a column for created date with a timestamp or even last updated timestamp, we would be able to leverage that. But ARC is not a CDC, a change data capture kind of tool. So we can leverage what the API provides, and some provide information like that. But if that's not in the API, I wouldn't, the ARC tool itself would not be able to provide it.
Okay. Next question. How well does ARC work with GraphQL?
So I've seen it done, but it's not a perfect fit by any means. So I probably wouldn't recommend that. I know, and maybe Maria can see, I've seen some ideas for enhancements to perhaps support that in the future. So if that's something we see, people asking for and more requests for, we would certainly, it would not be I don't think a massive change necessarily to allow it, but today I've seen it work, but I wouldn't, it was more of like a project. I wouldn't, go to prod with that. I don't know, Maria, do you see requests for GraphQL come in?
Yes, so we have had a few requests coming for GraphQL, and we are discussing this for having it on our roadmap. But you're absolutely correct. Currently, we do not support GraphQL. So this is something which may come in the future.
All right, excellent. All right, next question, guys. The lightning round continues. How difficult is it to build a template by ourselves for use in the UI, starting from a REST config file?
I'm not sure that I understand that. How difficult is it to build a template? So if you have the REST config file or the model, really that's basically all you would need to connect. There is a way to sample without necessarily going through the composer. So potentially you could automate it that way, but you lose some of the ease of configuration that the composer adds. Prior to us creating the composer, it really was a process of setting up a file where you have a list of endpoints to sample and the table name you want to give it. You could do that, and I suppose that's maybe what you mean by a template, but I'm figuring I may not be answering this. So if you want to add to it, and we could also potentially get back to you later.
Yeah, exactly. We have the person's name that asked this question, so we will be more than happy to contact the person that asked this question and hopefully be able to figure out exactly what they need.
Yeah, and I think if by template they mean model, it would be what I did, what I started doing with the Yelp API, where I started sampling the different endpoints. It's not super difficult, and we try to make it easier, as easy as possible. And the idea is to make it where a less technical person would be able to do that. I think we can still improve it, but it definitely has improved quite a bit, in the time since we've created it. So I think you definitely should be able to use the ARC Composer to create your own model by sampling the endpoints of your particular API.
Okay, great. And like I said, we'll be able to get back to that person as well to make sure that we answer his question to the fullest. So I appreciate it, Dennis. Next question. What happens when the source API changes, but I'm using the old API?
Yeah, so that kind of depends, right? If by the change there is new data coming back, you would want to sample it to get that new data. If data went away, you would probably see it as null. Depending on the change, it may or may not be, a breaking change. But as far as the models that we create, if there was a breaking change, we would treat that as a bug and, quickly fix it. As far as adding new functionality, for example, say new endpoints, that's something we would look to do. Probably wouldn't treat it in the same severity as like a breaking change. And the good thing is with the ARC Composer, it's certainly something you could do yourself. If there was an API that was new or updated, it's not difficult to sample it and pick up the update.
Okay, great. Looks like we have one more question, which is great because we're running low on time. How should the JDBC Connect string look like?
Yeah, so I showed it briefly, if you remember, what it would look like is, but JDBC, it would say auto rest, and then it would have the authentication. It would have a config pointing, parameter pointing to the model. Potentially, it may have, if there is other information like debug record, or if you're modifying anything else, all of that would be, part of it, the connection string. But it is very much a standard connection string as far as, compared to just about any driver that you would already be looking at. So.
No, it's perfect. I have one final question, and it's probably something that I can answer here. It says, I noticed that this presentation and demo is being recorded. Will I receive an email link to it so I can share amongst others? Absolutely. Everyone that attended today will receive a link in the email that they provided of the presentation and the demo. That includes people that registered for this webinar but could not attend. We'll also have it up on our website. And of course, if you have any further questions that weren't answered on this webcast, we're more than happy to be able to help you out with that as well. Dennis, Maria, I didn't know if you had any closing thoughts, but if not, we could end this webcast with thanks to everyone that attended.
Yep, that sounds great. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Maria, thank you as well. And thank you to everyone who attended. And we'll make ourselves available if you have any questions in the future. Thank you very much.